Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Wednesday, February 16th, and what a weekend it was for Virginia Tech athletics. On episode 224 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, we'll talk about huge wins for Virginia Tech men's basketball, Virginia Tech women's basketball, a great start to the season for Hokies softball, and another dual meet win for Hokies wrestling, making it 3 in a row. All of that and much more coming up on episode 224 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. Welcome into episode 224 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. However you are listening, whether that's on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or Stitcher, or if you're watching archived or live on the YouTube page. If you are on our YouTube, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when we're going live with the podcast every week. As always, the Tech Sideline Podcast brought to you by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Mentioned Hokies wrestling 3 straight dual wins to open up ACC play. 2 more big ones coming up this weekend on the road against Virginia and NC State. You can help continue to grow the wrestling program and the Southeast Regional Training Center. Go to southeastrtc.com to learn more and donate today. Great crew on set today here for episode 224. Across the way, as always, founder and general manager Will Stewart. To my right, lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline, Chris Coleman. In the 4th chair today, it's Katie Adams, coming back after a week off last week. And then Malcolm Stewart, our greatest podcast producer in the land, as always behind the scenes. And I'm your host, Jake Lyman. If you are on our YouTube page, you might notice something different. A couple extra cameras up today, some lighting changes as well. Will continuing to elevate the production value of the podcast.
Yes, we have some. So Malcolm showed Chris. We have a little bit of lighting for Chris now, and we need some more eye candy around Chris. And so instead of Will and Chris Cam, we now have Chris Cam and Will Cam separately.
So everybody's got their own camera now.
Right. Do crazy things.
Well, it's going to be a fun podcast today. Again, hasn't been much negative to talk about the last few weeks, and that's certainly the case this week. We're going to start in the first half with a lot of men's basketball talk, and we'll move on to women's softball and wrestling in the second half. But let's start with 2 big wins for Virginia Tech. Chris, we've talked about this. When the schedule was released, this was the stretch that you kind of pointed to. 3 straight home games, Syracuse, Virginia, North Carolina. Hokies got off to a huge start with back-to-back wins over the weekend.
Yeah, when Tech was 10-10, everybody was expecting them to be 10-11 after playing Florida State. Didn't work out that way. Tech beat Florida State, and then you looked after that, and you're like, man, there's a real opportunity to get back into the thick of things here if the Hokies play like we thought they were capable of playing all year. And that's certainly what they've been doing. And they haven't just beaten teams. You know, they're beating teams. You know, they're not beating them by 2 points at the last second.
Yep.
You know, they're controlling games for the most part. You know, the UVA game was closer than the final score indicated. But, you know, for the most part, Virginia Tech has really controlled all these games that they've played since that Florida State game. And as a result, you've seen their efficiency ratings go up. And as a result, their net ranking go up. And the net is heavily tied into efficiency ratings. I want to say last week on this podcast, we talked about how Tech was 116th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Well, now they're 80th.
Wow.
And that's a huge jump over the course of a week.
And we talked about how computers love this Virginia Tech team.
They still love them.
I was looking at all the rankings last night. I couldn't believe it. 35th in the net, nice. 28th in KenPom, and ESPN's BPI, 21st in the country for Virginia Tech. Yeah. Shouldn't be a bubble team probably, but
yeah,
I do not trust the selection committee. I do not trust them.
Well,
I know you got to win more games.
You got to win more games, and the computer rankings aren't necessarily a reflection of your record. They're a reflection of how efficient you are, and they indicate how good you should be, not necessarily how good you are. So, you know, at this point, you can't sit here and say, based on the fact that Tech is 0-4 or 0-5, whatever, against Quad 1 teams, you can't really say Tech is deserving of a spot right now.
Right. I would agree with that.
But, you know, they're capable. They're an NCAA tournament caliber team. That doesn't mean at the end of the day they will have done enough to make the NCAA tournament, though. And but there's still plenty of time to play their way in.
So random comment. While everybody else was watching Wake Forest and Duke last night, I was watching Texas A&M and Florida, and I felt better about Virginia Tech basketball. That was an ugly, pretty boring game. It ended up, I think, 56-55. The Fighting Buzz Williamses broke their 8-game losing streak or whatever it was. And the only reason they broke it was because Florida made a stupid play with 20 seconds left to go. They had a 2-point lead, and they fouled the 3-point shooter. So the kid makes all 3 free throws, and Texas A&M wins by 1. But it was ugly. Like Florida had, and maybe you got to give credit to Buzz's team, but Florida had 6 points with 8 minutes to go in the first half. And you contrast that with the Tech UVA game. That, the Castle crowd was great and all that, but just watch the basketball that was played Monday night. Both teams, that was exciting basketball. Tech made some great plays. UVA, I'm sorry, made some great plays also. And that was way prettier to watch than that Florida Texas A&M mess I watched last night.
And we're going to talk about Bubble Watch 2022 later on, but that win for Texas A&M does help Virginia Tech.
Because Florida's kind of in that same range.
At least according to Joe Lunardi, right now Virginia Tech is the 7th team outside of the field. I believe Florida was the 3rd entering Tuesday night's action. So,
but that horse is coming up fast on the outside.
Yes,
if they keep winning.
Yes. Well, let's talk about the Syracuse win first. We'll move on to the rivalry win over UVA. But Syracuse, I think the first thing you have to talk about, Justin Mutz. 2nd triple-double in program history. 12 points, 11 assists, 14 rebounds. And the first one, Chris Clark did it against the Citadel. This was against an ACC caliber opponent.
And Chris Clark's triple-double came down to Hadim C hitting like a 30-foot three-pointer at the buzzer.
So, really? So that was one of his assists?
Yeah, that was it was the last play of the game, I believe. And Hadim C of all people hit that 30-foot three-pointer and gave Chris Clark.
Who is still playing college basketball.
I was about to say, Hadim C was the one matched up on Paolo Banchero driving to the rim at the buzzer last night.
That was 6 years ago that Chris Clark did that, and Hadim C is still playing college basketball.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But so yeah, big difference in level of competition. I think Mutz he's such a unique player, and his uniqueness made him a really good matchup against that Syracuse 2-3 zone. He's such a great distributor of the ball, and he can score and rebound too. So the thing about assists, you got to have people knock down the shots.
Well, it's easier when they're dunking.
That's true. Early on though, it was him throwing it out to Couture on those 3-pointers. So
Couture had 3 3-pointers.
Yeah,
boom, boom,
so
boom.
so you've got to everything has to come together to get a triple-double, especially in college basketball. In the pros, you got 8 extra minutes, and everybody you're passing to can shoot and score and everything like that.
That's a good point. It's a 40-minute game. A triple-double in a 40-minute game is impressive.
You just don't see too many triple-doubles in college basketball because not only is it a shorter game, but for the most part, like not everybody on the team is going to be able to shoot in college. That's not necessarily the case for Virginia Tech, where everybody on the team can shoot. Yeah. But, in the NBA, you got more time, and you're passing to NBA-level players who are going to drain open jumpers like crazy.
I do have to say, I saw over the weekend another triple-double. I don't know if you remember Walker Kessler, 7-footer. He was with North Carolina last year.
So that's a name we were trying to remember yesterday. We were sitting around the office trying to remember the guy who transferred away from UNC, right?
And he's at Auburn now. And I forget who they were playing. But he had a triple-double, not with assists, but with blocks. He had 12 blocks in the game.
So I was going to say, back in the day when guys like Ralph Sampson played 4 years in college, it was more common for the triple-double with double-digit blocks to happen.
Now, I will say, technically speaking, this is Virginia Tech's 3rd triple-double.
Okay.
I remember a game where Bryant Matthews had double-digit points, rebounds, and turnovers.
Yes. I used to call Bryant Matthews, until he was a senior, I called him the human turnover.
That was a Ricky Stokes coach team, and then Seth Greenberg started coaching, and then all of a sudden he quit turning the ball over.
Did he win Big East Player of the Year as a senior?
No, because Emeka Okafor was playing for UConn at the time.
Because
everybody
Virginia
knew he was going
Tech
to win it, but he was awesome that year. He was a dominant player.
Yeah. And Justin Mutz, you mentioned turnovers. It had been an issue earlier on in the season. He had a game with 8 turnovers just a few weeks ago. It seems like he started to clean that up, and it's not becoming – it's either a great pass or a terrible pass. It's usually good passes that he's been getting out.
And he seems to have improved on that. But the thing about Mutz is when you've got a guy who's willing to thread the needle like that, you got to accept the fact that
There's a
sometimes
downside
it's not
to
going to
that.
work.
Yeah. So I tell people all the time, I'm not very good at in-game awareness / analysis. I see things more emotionally. So what I was seeing with Mutz was an unwillingness to shoot in the middle of that zone. So I was kind of stressing about that. And later he took a couple, missed them. Later on he made an important one. But that's kind of what I was focused on. So when they came on and said he had a triple-double, I was like, well, I wasn't paying attention to the right stuff. I was thinking, Justin Bibbs, when they put him in the middle of that zone, could turn and make that shot, which is a very difficult shot, that mid-range shot for modern basketball players.
I will say, I just finished watching The Last Dance, and Mutz, I saw somebody on our board say like Mutz is our Dennis Rodman. No, Mutz is our Scottie Pippen, because he's of assists. I mean, Scottie Pippen was like the first point forward. There were years where he led the Bulls in assists.
Yeah.
And and Pippen was a 3 and Mutz is a 4, so it's a little bit different. But Mutz is a guy who can really, really distribute, and it's so valuable. Like in Virginia Tech's system, it's not automatically going to be. You're thinking 80s, 90s era basketball when you automatically think the point guard is going to lead the team in assists, and that's not necessarily the case these days because forwards are a lot more skilled. I'd be interested to know Mutt's story because like Scottie Pippen went to Central Arkansas, and as a freshman he was a 6'1" point guard.
Interesting.
And then he grew 6 inches throughout the rest of his career and had to make the transition to small forward and was a first-round pick. But he retained those passing skills that he had when he was a point guard. And a lot of those years, he was the Bulls' leader in assists.
So speaking of Mutz, when he was at Delaware, he put something up on his Instagram story the other day. He put up 2 clips of him making the SportsCenter top 10 when he played at Delaware.
Wow.
So it wasn't like the guy just came out of nowhere. Apparently at Delaware, he was making some highlight plays.
He made one on Saturday night as well. Usually when you get a triple-double, points is not the last thing to come, but it was for him. Yeah. And he got the alley-oop at the very end. And I want to say...
Couture.
I want to say it was Mike Monaco on the broadcast said, that's the way you get a triple-double, which was kind of cool. Yeah. Want to talk defense as well in that game. Chris, you said how the defensive efficiency went way up this week. A lot of that has to do with playing Syracuse the way they did. Syracuse was averaging 87 points per game over their previous 4 wins entering Saturday night, scored just 59 points against the Hokies in Castle Coliseum, 37 of which came from Buddy Boeheim and Joe Girard.
It'll be interesting to see what Syracuse looks like without any Boeheims on the court. I expect the Boeheim on the sideline will ride off into the sunset at that point. And I actually started seeing, obviously I was reading through the Syracuse social media post at the end of the game to look at all the comments all the GIFs Tech fans leave and everything like that. But buried in there was Syracuse fans talking about how Jim Boeheim's holding them hostage and he needs to go.
Yes.
But anyway, back to your point. I thought Mike Young made a great adjustment late in that game. Against Syracuse, you don't necessarily need a true point guard on the court because they're not going to press you, and they run that specific defensive system. And their guards and wings are so tall. Like Boeheim's a really good player. He's a tough matchup because he looks more like a tight end, but he's like a shooting guard. Yeah. So once they made that adjustment and they took both Storm Murphy and Sean Batula off the court and just put in bigger guards, I think Syracuse went like 4 or 5 minutes without scoring. I think that was a tie game at 54, and then you look up and Tech's up by like 8 or 10 points, and I'm like, Syracuse hasn't scored since we made that lineup adjustment.
Yeah, and also looking at their lineup, they were missing a starter.
Yes.
And they have 5 guys going into that game. They have 5 guys that average over 12 points a game, which is really remarkable. But that's because they had 3 backups who played very few minutes. And then you remove one of the starters, and I wonder if part of, like Boeheim was shooting great early in the game. I wonder if part of it just got to be fatigue at the end of the game.
I think it's a little easier to play more minutes when you play a 2-3 zone on defense because you're not chasing guys across the court off screens and everything like that. So it's not necessary or not as necessary for Syracuse to have as much depth as some other teams. But that's kind of become a recurring theme for Syracuse basketball, I think, in the last few years, is they lack depth. Each one of their teams seems to lack depth. And that goes back to, like, I just don't think Boeheim's as active on the recruiting trail.
That's right. That's a coach that is in, Buzz did the same thing when he was here. He recruited like crazy his first year or two and then just added one guy a year and,
Right. And,
two different things. Buzz is a lot younger and more energetic.
Yeah, Buzz has made some errors with his assistant coaching staff, in my opinion. And he keeps stop me if you've heard this before, and I don't want to turn this into the Buzz Williams podcast, but he's too loyal to people within his inner circle. Like two of his 3 assistants at Texas A&M, he's promoted from like grad assistant position. Yeah, exactly. They had absolutely no coaching experience or recruiting experience before he promoted them.
Yeah, it was interesting watching them last night. He's 3 years into it now.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And by the time he was 3 years into it, Tech was a pretty good basketball team.
They were in the NCAA tournament.
And A&M just really didn't look that good to me last night.
Right. So. They lost a lot of players after, I guess, his first year. And when he was SEC Coach of the Year that year. And for whatever reason, lost a bunch of players. And so now it's like they're having to rebuild all over again. Yeah. And I think he's just he got Roccaforte back as an assistant, but he needs to he needs at least one more high quality assistant in there who's used to recruiting. But anyway,
now for those of you that pay attention to this stuff, he was wearing a suit last night, and he could have been coaching anybody. There was no maroon, no Texas A&M logos, nothing.
Yeah.
So he's still Buzz Williams. Anyway, let's move on.
Well, before we move on from Syracuse, want to mention you were talking about the bench not being very involved. Just 2 bench points for the Orange on Saturday. Yeah. So it was pretty much Boeheim and Girard making shots on the perimeter or nobody.
Yeah, Boeheim and Girard are really good players.
They're great. They had that stretch that kind of got Syracuse back in the game, but then Tech able to pull away. Got that win. That was their 5th in a row. And we're going to move on to the Virginia win, but we want to try something new here. Will's got some questions from the boards. Let's throw one in here before we talk some UVA.
Let's see. I like this question. This is not relevant to stuff that happened in the last week, but Nova Hokie 95 asked on our message board, true or false, we, Virginia Tech, seem to match up better against teams that are teams, in quotes, versus teams that are more a collection of athletes?
That's a good question.
That's what it looks like.
Let's look at the teams that we've beaten in our 6-game winning streak. Florida State's a collection of athletes.
Yes.
Yeah. They were missing.
And they're struggling right now.
Right. I would classify them more in the collection of athletes than I would team because they don't have all their pieces.
But that game was funny because it wasn't like they lost a guard, a forward, and a center. They had a bunch of big guys.
They still had 4 7-footers out there
that literally couldn't stop Hunter Couture. It was hilarious to watch one of their 7-footers try to cover Hunter Couture.
Right. I don't consider teams like Georgia Tech or Pitt to be anything.
Well, yeah, what are they?
I mean,
they're poorly coached and they're not that
horrible.
athletic.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. They don't play team basketball. At least they don't show any. Yeah. They don't show the ability to pick up team concept basketball, and really between those two teams, there's like one player I would take on Tech's team. So
DeVoe, right?
Yeah, right. So they don't have. They lack individual talent, and they don't play like a team either. So I don't know what I consider
really draw conclusions
bad teams. They're just bad.
Well, I go back to earlier in the year when Tech played Memphis, and that was jarring. And Memphis is not a good team. They're a tremendous collection of athletes. And then you fast forward, I don't know how many games after that, and you play St. Bonaventure, which is the difference in a team like St. Bonaventure and a team like Memphis was pretty stark. St. Bonaventure did not have the out-and-out athletes. Mm-hmm. They also played poorly that night, and Tech just beat the pants off of them.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best example in the context of this season. And Navy also. I think at the time Navy had beaten Virginia. I don't know how the rest of their season has gone. I'd put them more in the team category, and Tech beat them handily.
UVA obviously more in the team category.
Yeah. Syracuse as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it could be something to that. We'll see. We're going to be playing. I would say
a collection of athletes
on Saturday.
Yeah, Baycott is definitely now. Baycott, I think, has improved a lot in his career, but he's definitely a guy that is a beast and is athletic.
Well, North Carolina playing well right now. They scored 24 of the first 25 points against Florida State on Saturday.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of that game. Florida State, what a mess. They won last night, though, right?
They beat somebody.
They beat Clemson.
Clemson by a point.
Clemson, yeah.
So they snapped their 6-game losing streak.
North Carolina was up 62-24 at halftime in that game.
It's like I don't even know how it's possible to give up 62 points in 20 minutes of basketball.
You got to try.
I mean, or to be more accurate, you have to not try.
Try.
I mean, defense is effort, man. So that shows like they got off to a bad start and they just quit.
Just mailed it in.
Yeah.
But you say that Carolina's hot, but Syracuse had won 4 in a row. UVA had won 4 or 5 in a row, and
Carolina hasn't been great away from
North Carolina. Much better in the Dean Smith Center than they are on the road. So
anyway, appreciate that question from Nova Hokie 95. Like that one.
Well, and we'll talk about beating teams that play team basketball, and Virginia, the Hokies on Valentine's Day, beating UVA, a huge win considering, at least according to Joe Lunardi and a few other outlets, Virginia was a little bit ahead of Virginia Tech on the bubble. Seems like they flip-flopped after the Hokies beat them by 9 on Monday night.
It's an interesting comparison because like UVA has by far the best win of either team.
Yes.
Because they won at Duke.
At Duke, yeah.
Tech doesn't have a quadrant 1 win. And
they also have the 2 clearly bad losses among the 2.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you balance that out if you're the committee? So to me, like I think both teams have very, very similar resumes. I think both teams are very similar. I think Tech is a little bit better than UVA.
Up and down the roster.
Yeah, I think Tech is a little bit better. I think Tech could have swept them. I mean, that came down to the last shot, and Tech missed 2 open 3-pointers at the end. And if that had been the case,
in Charlottesville,
yes.
So if one of those shots had gone in, Tech would have won their last 3 against UVA.
That's right,
because they beat them in Blacksburg last year.
Yeah.
And before we talk about the play on the floor, we got to talk about the atmosphere on Monday night. That was a conversation we had on last week's podcast that Castle just hasn't seemed to be the same this year as it had in the last few years. That was not the case on Monday night. Phenomenal atmosphere.
Man,
you're right. We talked about it last week, and you could see it coming because it was sold out. They lifted the restrictions.
It was great timing to lift the restrictions because 3 big home games that everybody was really interested in going to.
Yep.
And so, yeah, great atmosphere in there, really loud.
And apparently UNC tickets on StubHub are a couple $100.
$250, I think, for nosebleeds.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
I think that's what they're going for right now.
Anybody got an extra ticket?
Well, we're working on it.
Well, and Will, speaking of the atmosphere, you had a tweet go viral over the last few days of the student section singing to Enter Sandman.
I have missed so many opportunities at basketball games to take a good video. So I took a video that was 1 minute and 17 seconds long, and it started before the tip. It was they were doing the whole Enter Sandman thing, and the music was playing before the tip, of course. Then when they tip off, they cut off the music, and the students do the rest of it a cappella. I sent all 1 minute and 17 seconds to Twitter. It kept, fortunately, the last 47 seconds. It cut off, the first 30.
Yeah.
So you get the a cappella singing, and then God bless Keve Aluma for, after all the singing is over and that cheer ends, Keve Aluma hits a turnaround jumper, and it just...
It wouldn't have been the same if he'd missed the shot.
I know, but it was awesome, and yeah, it kind of took off and got a life of its own.
I was saying, I think last night I checked, it was at 25,000 views or something like that.
Something like that. I could
retweets.
where'd my phone go? I could pull it up. It was, oh gosh, it's had 160,000 impressions.
Wow.
No new followers, though.
But we talked about that on Twitter. That part of the analytics is broken.
Wow.
Damian Salas and Izzy Post piled in and said, "Yeah, that always says
Oh yeah,
0.
I caught the tail end of that. Yeah.
And David just informed me tickets not quite as high as I thought. 170 is the cheapest ticket on StubHub, but still a lot.
That's a bunch of UNC fans, by the way.
Yeah,
UNC fans always show up in force on the road.
And I went looking, and that was I just got derailed. That was a huge shock when Tech entered the ACC. Tech had been in, the Metro fans didn't travel to Blacksburg. That was a pretty spread out conference. Atlantic 10, forget it. Big East, forget it. And then you go into the ACC, and Virginia Tech's very first ACC game at home was against North Carolina. and I swear it was 30% Tar Heel fans at least.
Sure, I mean it's the opposite of football. Like when Tech goes and plays at UNC,
Yeah.
there's
It might as well be a home game.
right.
And then so of course Tech basketball had been so bad for so long
Yeah.
that a lot of fans around here had grown up Duke fans and UNC fans, and this persisted for years. Where there was a good when Duke and of course JJ Redick, was playing. I don't remember what time frame he was playing, but he grew up in Roanoke, so there were a lot of Duke fans, and finally that's mostly ironed itself out. But you will see a lot of baby blue on Saturday.
and they're willing to pay a lot of money for tickets. I mean, back David covers games for us now, but when I covered games after a UNC game, even after like Tech would beat UNC, the UNC fans just pile outside the Carolina buses outside Castle to take pictures with players.
Yeah.
And they even come down into the hallways in Castle, like inside the building. Like there's nobody to stop them, so they just go in so they can just, oh, here comes this guy walking by. Everybody takes his picture, and everything like that.
Wow.
It's very
It's different.
It's different. I mean, they love their basketball program. So yeah, $170 for StubHub. I mean, if you're a local Carolina fan, which there are plenty around here. I grew up in Danville. There were more Carolina fans than Virginia Tech fans.
Yeah.
So, but they don't get a chance to see their team play because they can't. Or I guess the Dean Domes, it's a hike for them if you're around here.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to dish out $170 because that's your one time to see them play.
Should be a good atmosphere. You would assume student section going to show out in full force once again. 4 p.m. tip on Saturday. Before we move on from the atmosphere on Monday, I just want to touch on the Kihei Clark air ball.
Oh.
I mean, he missed the air ball 2 minutes into the game,
very early in the
and
game.
then he didn't hit a shot until there was 30 seconds left.
Yeah, so that's the part of that game we really need to talk about is the job Storm Murphy and Sean Padula did on him.
He was 0 of 7 until the last minute of the game.
Right, until the last minute of the game. And it was funny. At one point in the second half, I told Will, I guess there's probably like 12 minutes left. I looked up and I saw at that point that he hadn't scored. I knew he hadn't done much, but I didn't know that he hadn't scored yet. And like at that point, like it was a really close game. And I told Will, I was like, man, can't help but feel this way.
That guy.
Kihei Clark's going to score 3 points, and they're going to be at the last second, and UVA's going to win. Fortunately, that didn't happen.
Oh, and it's funny that he said that to me because I had told Malcolm probably right around the same time. I was like, Malcolm, you watch that guy. With 5 seconds left to go, he's going to make a 3-pointer. And he didn't. The whole team didn't make any 3-pointers.
We're so positive.
Was he the one that made that shot to beat Duke, or was it a different player?
No,
that was a different player.
Beekman.
That was
Clark did make one at the end of the game to beat Tech
2019.
in Mike Young's first year.
Yeah. So
And then Radford went to the other end and almost tied it at the buzzer.
Yes.
but was it a Clark layup that wound up sitting on the back of the rim? I think
might have been
I think he had got
2018.
down the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, Kihei Clark's been there a while now.
He's part of their national championship team.
Yes, he was the
yeah.
one who made the pass in the Final Four to beat Auburn, I want to say. To the Elite Eight to beat Purdue. Correct. Yes, so Kihei Clark heckling what was fun for the students. Tony Bennett was asked about it after the game. He said he didn't notice it, but he said if you don't want the students to do that, don't shoot an air ball.
Yeah, exactly. The big difference, like I remember when I was a student and Tech played Wake Forest, and Chris Paul only scored 3 points.
Wow.
And the students were all over him. And like he made eye contact with the student section a couple times.
And then it was on.
He wasn't a veteran NBA player like he is now, but it did rattle him to a certain extent. He finished the game with 3 points. Yeah. Problem is Wake Forest had a ton of good players, and Tech still lost by 20. So they didn't even need Chris Paul to score.
Crazy to think he put up 17 and 14 last night, still going at 38, 39, something
That's
like
crazy.
that.
Wow.
And a lot of praise for the atmosphere from ESPN. Dan Schulman on the call said it was one of the loudest places he'd been all year. We mentioned Keve Aluma. He had a nice night against Syracuse, was huge against Virginia. No other Hokie made more than 2 shots from the field.
Wow.
So I was going to mention that back to what I said earlier about kind of seeing things emotionally. What I saw through that filter was the entire Virginia Tech team playing well. I didn't realize that he was 10 of 14 and nobody else made more than 2 shots. It didn't feel that way. It felt like the entire team contributed to the win.
And we talked about earlier in the season about how he kind of wasn't living up to the first team All-ACC billing that he was given entering the season, second in ACC preseason player of the year voting. It seems like he's finally started to come through, and I believe somebody on the message boards may have had a good question about this.
Yeah, so here's a question from Maroon Effect. Keve's badass light went on. How and why now?
That's interesting. David actually asked the question in the post game the other night. It was the first question about, and Mike Young responded. You asked it about the team, but
I asked about defense on guard.
Okay, yeah. And Mike Young just started talking in generalities about playing with more of an edge, and the whole team I think is playing tougher, more physical, with more of an edge now than they were earlier in the season, and I think that especially applies to Keve Aluma. Why that wasn't happening earlier, I don't know.
So it makes me think of a couple things. Number one, I think it was the Syracuse game. It was a little dicey late. It may have been UVA, and he got hit with a good pass on the baseline, and it's a situation where he has at times gone up soft against the defense, but he powered up and dunked it.
Against UVA, he wasn't messing around.
No,
he was just going up and dunking. It was no let me do a head fake and see what happens. I mean, he just went straight up with it.
So we'll see how the rest of the season goes, but it also makes me think of that Justin Robinson game against Syracuse, which we've talked about before.
Yes.
And Justin was a senior, and this was halfway or halfway through his senior year. And I remember watching him that night thinking, it's on now.
Yeah.
And then he got hurt.
Let's knock on wood here that's not like that game.
Right.
Yeah,
now,
and
I actually wanted to make this point too. It's getting to be a lot of fun to play Syracuse in Castle Coliseum because you're seeing some great – Tech is beating them in Castle, but you're also seeing great individual performances. So you saw Justin Robinson break the career assist record and the single game 3-point record that night in the same game against Syracuse.
Night.
And now you see a triple-double against Syracuse.
Yeah.
So maybe now we're seeing why Jim Boeheim never wanted to bring his team to Castle.
I doubt he's having a good time. That's right.
I wanted to talk about with these two wins how the first 4 games of the win streak, it felt like it was a lot about shooting from beyond the arc. It was, Tech's hot right now, but there was kind of a little hesitation. What if they go cold? Well, that happened this week. They shot 13 of 47 from 3-point range and still won
the two
both
games combined.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Wow.
And, it seemed especially cold for large stretches against UVA. I think that for the most part, except for possession here or there, they got good looks against UVA. They ran their offense like they wanted to. They could have scored over 70 against that group if on a normal shooting.
If they
night,
hit shots, right.
which would be a very good performance against the pack line. And UVA is not nearly as good defensively as they normally are, but still. And that goes hand in hand with improving defensively. Like I said, over the last week, they've gone from 116th to 80th in adjusted defensive efficiency. So, they're just starting to play better team basketball in general. And it's one thing to go out there and hammer Georgia Tech and Pitt, who are just awful basketball teams. But Syracuse they're not good, but they're not awful either. And, and UVA is above average. They're not nearly as good as they normally are, but they're still a solid team. So to see those performances carry over, you're like, we're supposed to blow out Pitt. We're supposed to blow out Georgia Tech. But what are we going to do when somebody hits back? And Syracuse and UVA are much more capable of hitting back, and Tech was still able to handle it.
And Hokies, again, 5 of 20 from 3-point range against Virginia. Yeah. You would think in most games when you shoot 25% from 3-point range, Tech's not going to win the game, but they ended up winning by 9. Also helps Virginia didn't hit a 3-pointer in the game as well.
Yeah.
Did UVA play any games in between their win at Duke and playing Virginia Tech?
They played Georgia Tech this past weekend, and beat them by 6.
It wasn't.
You should beat Georgia Tech by more than 6. This is not a dominant UVA team, not by any stretch. To be honest with you, they caught lightning in a bottle against Duke. UVA is not that good of they're above average, but they have no business beating Duke on the road. No ACC team this year has any business beating Duke on the road.
Wake Forest almost did it last
night. They almost did it last night. Which actually makes me wonder, Duke's far and away the best team in the ACC, but since the ACC is not very good, how good is Duke actually?
Yeah, so now regarding Duke, I don't think you need to worry about Duke. I was looking at Instagram last night, and On3 had a listing of – it's their ranking of the top 10 basketball recruits in the 2023 class. Duke's got 3 of the top 4 and the number 10 guy coming in, according to On3. I don't know.
So what happened with Coach K last night?
He left at
he was feeling ill.
halftime.
Okay.
Halftime.
Well,
I got some inside scoop because my sister works
Right.
at Duke
Sweet.
for Coach K's daughter. She just said that he basically hadn't eaten all day, and so he was about to pass out.
He hadn't eaten all day.
Yeah.
Why?
Good question.
Forgot.
I forgot.
I can tell you, he's a lot older than I am. I'm 57, and so my sensation of this is at the gym, going to work out at the gym. There are days where you got it and days where you don't. There are days where if you're deadlifting, the head rush is a real thing, and so when you're his age, if you don't eat, man.
High stress situation too.
Well, look, so he left at halftime.
Yes.
And they were winning at halftime.
They were up by, I want to say, 12 at halftime.
So you can talk about recruiting class rankings all you want. They were up by 12 at halftime and then almost lose the game.
Wow.
And for those watching that game,
And who was coaching them? Next year's head coach.
yes. And for those watching, I have to believe that was basket interference. I don't know if you guys saw it. It
I would
looked
agree.
like Wendell Moore tipped it over the cylinder before Mark Williams slammed it down. I digress. That's probably basket interference outside of Cameron Indoor. But let's talk about the bubble watch. Everybody wants to know, and there's a question if you want to have them ask, what percentage chance do you think Tech has of making the tournament right now?
Yeah, so that's Gretna Hokie. What percentage chance do you give the Hokies to make the NCAA men's tourney? And he's got another question we'll ask in the second.
It's so hard to know because I'd have to go in and look at the schedules of every other bubble team. And so it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
I want to say Will last week.
I said 10 to
20% last
20%.
week.
I'm
So you're
feeling
taking up to
better.
25 to 40% now.
25 to 35. I'm feeling better. And I also read, GC Hokie 34, who
He studies this a lot closer than us.
yeah, and he is he's the very level-headed voice of reason. So the discussion was, how many does Virginia Tech need to win? That's a
And this
That's
is
that's a
keep
tough
in mind,
task.
GC Hokie 34 is a former college basketball coach.
And it's a very basic discussion to ask how many games do you have to win. Well, it depends on what games they are, and
it depends
what
on
the rest
whatever
of the bubble does.
I mean, what happens in the conference tournament? Does some bubble team run off a bunch of wins in a row and win a league and push one of those top teams back to the bubble?
Right.
It'd
But his
be beneficial for Tech if like all the other bubble teams get knocked out in their first game in the conference tournament. But you can't project that. How do you project that?
So his summary of it was, he said, I read this line as supposed to. He said, I've been saying all along that 19 wins will get Virginia Tech in. And the other part of the discussion I remember was, when you're on the bubble, you tend to your fear is that all the other bubble teams are going to win all their games, and that's ridiculous. They're not going to. Like what
There's
happened
a reason
to Florida
they're on the
last
bubble.
Florida State was in the tournament 3 weeks ago. They were top of the ACC standings.
8 seed.
Right. Then they lost 6 in a
Wow.
row.
Wow.
And they're not even in the discussion anymore.
No.
And Virginia Tech wasn't in the discussion 3 weeks ago. Now they're in the discussion because they've won 6 in a row. So there's still 5 regular season games left plus the tournament. A lot can change between now and then.
So I've upgraded to 25 to 35%, but you got to keep winning. And of course, Captain Obvious reporting for duty. Saturday's game is huge.
And again, ESPN's Joe Lunardi has the Hokies in the next 4 out right now, would be the 7th team outside of the field. Still some work to do. 5 more games to go, plus the tournament. 3 more wins doesn't seem like, if you go 3-2 and go 1 and done in the tournament, that's 19 wins. I would feel like that wouldn't be enough for Virginia Tech.
And that's where the lack of trust in the selection committee comes in, and you're like, nah.
Well-
Like Carolina's kind of floating around. I don't know what their numbers are,
Look,
but
if
they
we
don't have Q1 wins either.
But they're going to win like 22 or 23 games overall. Though.
And they're North Carolina.
Against a tougher schedule. Their overall strength of schedule is higher than Virginia Tech's.
Yes, that's correct.
If Virginia Tech wins 19 games with no quadrant 1 wins, can you honestly take off your orange and maroon glasses? Can you honestly say they deserve to be in the NCAA?
I don't think so, no.
Right.
If I had to say right now, I think Tech probably needs to go 4-1 in the last 5 and win 2 in the tournament. I think that makes you feel good about them getting in.
I feel good about it then, yeah.
They've got a chance in some other scenarios, but again, North Carolina on Saturday, that's a big one in Castle Coliseum, 4 p.m. Tech has not fared well against the Tar Heels the last few times they've played them, including each of the last 2 ACC tournaments. So it's going to be an important one on Saturday.
I have this fear of like Leaky Black can't shoot, right? And this is an example of how like UNC has dropped off as a program. Leaky Black starts for them. He doesn't start for your normal UNC team that you and I think about. Not even close. I can't make a jump shot, so we never guard him because he can't shoot. He seems to make them against us, right?
Yeah.
He certainly made 3 big ones last game. I mean, it's the right strategy. So to me, I'm going to be watching Leaky Black. Like if he misses his first shot against us when we leave him wide open,
feel good.
I'm going to start feeling good about it.
All right.
Well, UNC currently, according to David Cunningham, just let me know. According to Joe Lunardi, they are on the 10 line. I want to say they might even be in the last 4 buys. So could be another important one.
You're right. They're our last 4 buys.
Just like Tech beating UVA kind of flip-flopping, maybe Tech beating UNC slides them back and Tech up a little bit. Going to be an important one on Saturday. With that, let's get into our break. But first, I want to talk to Katie Adams in the 4th chair.
Yeah, so I have a couple tidbits and then a fun question for y'all to answer. First thing, one of UVA's weaknesses in the matchup on Monday was their lack of three-pointers because they shot absolutely none. So that was the first time since March 1st, 2012 against Clemson that a Hokies opponent did not score a single three-pointer. So Let's hope that UNC follows suit. Probably not.
So that's a couple of kind of remarkable things that have happened. Pitt didn't have any offensive rebounds except for the team rebound at the
They
end.
didn't have any individual offense.
Yes.
Right, individual offensive rebounds. That's since 2007. This is since 2012 for that stat. So
10
told you I
years.
love those statistical anomalies.
With a triple-double in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting a few back-to-back-to-back.
And then we have another opportunity to extend our ACC win streak in program history if we win this week. So, as most people know, we're currently tied for the longest ACC win streak in program history. Last time we won 6 in a row in ACC play was that 2015-2016 season. Lost the 7th game to Miami in the ACC tournament in DC, 88-82. So thankfully we're at home for a chance to extend that streak. But
So let me jump in here and ask,
Yeah, go
what
ahead.
year was that again?
It was the 2015-2016 season. So I guess it had rolled over to
That was
2016 by
that was the
then.
NIT season.
That was that
Yes,
J. Rob's
because
freshman
we lost to
year?
Butler
Yes.
right after that.
Yeah, that team really came on at the end.
At the end.
Yeah. they
So
played
you
some
knew
great
they
ball.
were going to be good heading into the next year.
Yeah. Okay.
And then moving on to UNC, obviously not an opponent to gloss over, but just wanted to point out that they have not won in Castle in 6 years. The last time they did was in 2016, but the last time they played here was that 79-77 double overtime win in Castle in 2020.
Mike Young's first year,
Yes.
I think.
Wow. I didn't know. I wouldn't have thought that Tech had won that many in a row inside Castle Coliseum.
Yeah.
Tech's record in Castle, dating back to the Buzz, it's quite good. I mean, how many wins in a row did they run off against Duke in Castle? A bunch. Until
Couple.
Duke finally, I think they won in Castle in Mike Young's first year.
Yes.
Right.
But then Tech came back and beat them in Castle last year. So I want to say Tech has won 4 out of the last 5 or 5 out of the last 6 against Duke at home.
Wasn't it? It was 3 years in a row. Tech beat Duke in Castle on the exact same day. Sometime in mid-February, like right around this time, they played Duke in Castle on the same day and beat them 3 years in a row.
Yeah, you're right. And Mike Young said on his postgame the other night, he said several ACC coaches have told him that Castle's the most difficult place to win.
Yes, the crowds leading up until the last couple of games have not been great, but man,
But
when
you
they're-
can understand why.
Yeah.
So I think Tech has a good chance to win on Saturday.
Yes.
And they'll be 17-10. So
Carolina's going to have to earn it.
yeah, they'll have to earn it. I agree. And then I think Tech will win on Saturday. So just after that, if I'm right, don't blow it against Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Like you said, with beating Duke on that same day every year, it's kind of like Tech football's luck with the September 3rd date, which is when we beat Florida State, West Virginia, UNC. There's another one in there, I'm pretty sure. But a good date for the football team. On to the fun question. So moving forward, talking about the most likable Virginia Tech men's basketball players of all time, I feel like it's hard to leave out Justin Mutz. For as long as I can remember, Zach Leday has been my favorite player for as long as time. And I think Justin Mutz is probably rivaling that right about now. So I wanted to ask what y'all's top 3 favorite basketball players of all time are.
Favorite or likable?
I don't know what's standard. I guess I would just say favorite.
Jamon Gordon.
Jamon is up there. Yeah.
Justin Robinson.
Going way back, Jimmy Caruth.
If Tyrese Radford had stayed, he'd be my number 3.
Yeah.
It's really disappointing for me.
I grew up with Malcolm Delaney I loved watching him play. Eric Green as well was fantastic.
Don't sleep on Seth Allen, man. Seth Allen
was cool.
Yeah.
I remember when Seth Allen and Zach Lede transferred in, and they both had to sit out a year. Somebody gave me tickets basically behind the Tech bench, a lot of tickets. So I got to sit behind the bench a lot that year. And those two guys on the bench, just the energy that they projected was very positive. And I tell this story all the time. Seth Allen's dad used to sit like around the corner, sort of near where the players go in the tunnel. And he was a very large man. I think he's since passed away, actually. But he was a very loud, very positive person.
I met him the night before, like, the first game. Or no, just a few hours before the first game of Buzz's era, I think. And he was at the game even though Seth was sitting out and everything. I met him at Alumni Hall, actually, of all places. And
I went over and introduced myself to him at the end of one season because, and I remember one game in particular, Tech was getting curb stomped by West Virginia. And Seth's dad was the whole game. Keep going, you can do it, baby. You know, just positive stuff. And that's why Seth is the way he was.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I always liked him a lot.
It's hard for me. Mutz might be my third. Brian Matthews may be my third. I don't know. My prediction is by the end of his career, Sean Padula will be in my top three.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking the same.
Somebody you mentioned earlier in the podcast actually might be my third. Justin Bibbs.
That's what I was going to say. He gets
Bibbs,
overlooked.
Bibbs always had a smile on his face.
Right.
The only time I ever saw Bibbs not smile after a post game was when UVA came in and like shellacked us by like 30. And nobody saw it coming. It wasn't a surprise that they won, but they just destroyed Tech. That was the year when Tech, like 2 weeks later, went to Charlottesville and beat them.
Yes.
And like you're like, oh my God, how did we just beat them in Charlottesville when they just beat us by 30 in Blacksburg? But after that game where UVA shell-shocked Tech in Blacksburg, that's the only post game where I never saw Justin Bibbs smile. He was always such a positive attitude guy. Always had a smile on his face. So he's a guy I always really liked too.
Yeah.
When he was a freshman, he was playing on one of the national teams, like U18, U17, and I was flying out of Dulles, and my dad just points over. He's like, "That's Justin Bibbs." He was going to go play in a tournament somewhere, so I went and gave him a go Hokies. So I always liked him for that. Met him, he laughed, and I think he took a picture with me or something.
And I believe he was actually a James Johnson recruit that we retained.
I think you're right.
Buzz
Yeah.
retained.
Yeah, good move by Buzz.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you, Katie. That was fun. That was I always like looking back at Virginia Tech basketball. Some fun players.
Yeah, we're going to have to take that one and cut it out and do it as a separate video on YouTube. That'll be fun.
Definitely. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up men's basketball. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk the women's team, who is now 11-3 in the ACC, continuing to move up in projections for the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about their success and also some other great developments with softball and wrestling over the weekend as well. Stay with us here on episode 224 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to episode 224 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Before we hop into some women's basketball, I want to remind you, if you're on our YouTube channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to turn on notifications so you know when you go live. Will Stewart still across the way. Katie Adams in the fourth chair. We have a new addition as Chris Coleman is subbed out. We've got David Cunningham in to talk some women's hoops. Couldn't have been much better for the women's basketball team over the weekend. Played two ranked opponents in Castle Coliseum. Beat number 11 Georgia Tech on Thursday, then number 23 UNC on Sunday. Now 11-3 all alone in third place in the ACC. Kenny Brooks seems to have found his groove here with this team, and they're currently on the 5 line, according to Charlie Cream.
Yeah, they're good. Did you get to watch the games over the weekend? Did you watch the game? I know Georgia Tech was Thursday.
So
North Carolina
I was at
Sunday.
the gym, but I watched the live stats for the North Carolina game. So it was a little nerve-wracking at the end, waiting for the update.
Yeah, Asia Shepherd said it best after the North Carolina game, because Tech went down 21-9 after the first quarter against North Carolina, and this is a North Carolina team that absolutely demolished them in Chapel Hill.
So let's do some math. That was 73-48, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, they had outscored Tech 94-57 in five quarters of basketball.
And immediately, and this is something Asia Shepherd said, teams in the past, like Virginia Tech teams in the past, they wouldn't have won that game. But this Virginia Tech team stuck together and basically put their feet in the ground and didn't budge and fought back. And by halftime, I think they trailed by 2 points. And then they ran away with it in the second half. North Carolina gave Tech some fits, but then in the Georgia Tech game, Hokies absolutely dominated that one. Yeah. Georgia Tech is really, really good, but the Hokies pretty much led and controlled the game. Program best 4 ranked wins in a season. I actually published a column this morning, just about the evolution of the program under Kenny Brooks and how, Kenny joked in the press conference after Sunday's game about how, when he got hired in 2016, he thought he was Gino Auriemma because he came here and everybody was like, yeah, you're going to win, mm-hmm. And he's like, it's going to take some time. And, first 3 years weren't exactly pretty. They went to the WNIT every year, but that fourth year they were going to go to the tournament, and then COVID happened. And they've, that's of course when they got Elizabeth Kitley and Kayla King in, and it's crazy to think that Asia Shepherd's been here almost the entire time. And I know you'll talk about the record that she broke, but this team is really, really good. They got 4 games left, and they really control their own destiny because they got number 3 Louisville on the road, and number 4 NC State at home. So this is a really good team, and people don't talk about its defense enough. They have held 9 of their 14 opponents under 40% shooting in ACC play, and they are really, really talented. And it's crazy to think what 5 or 6 years does to a program.
Yeah.
And looking at those 2 wins, I think the main takeaway you have is that Georgia Amor is turning into a bona fide star for this team at point guard. I think heading into the season, you pointed Asia Shepherd and Elizabeth Kitley, and they've been great all season. But Georgia Amor against Georgia Tech, she led the team in scoring in both games, and then that step-back three-pointer to kind of put the game away against Georgia Tech. Number 1 play on SportsCenter that night.
Somebody about 3 podcasts ago talked her up. Who was that? That would be me.
I also talked her up, but you started the conversation.
So that step back 3 was the number one
Sports
play.
Center. Yeah,
nice.
She broke that girl's ankle bad. But, it's funny because my dad will text me, and he's texted me this a couple times or told me it. He's like, Georgia Amor, by the time she graduates, she's going to be like the women's basketball version of Justin Robinson, where it's like she can make any pass on the court, and she can speed it up or slow it down. She can kind of do whatever. And she's that talented. And it's crazy to think that she's only
a sophomore.
Yeah. And Kenny Brooks, in his post-game, I believe he was saying something like, he used to say to Georgia, who's the best point guard in the ACC? Yeah. And she kind of would I am. And now it seems like she actually is confident. And I mean, she may not be wrong. I think she would be in the conversation considering how she's been playing.
I think the only other player that's in that conversation for best point guard in the ACC is Olivia Miles, the freshman from Notre Dame,
she's pretty darn good.
Who's insane. But Georgia leads the ACC in 3-point field goal percentage, and Georgia's number 2 in assists behind Miles. And Georgia does so many of the little things, and it's honestly crazy to see how much she's improved. And when you've got her, a point guard that defenses really have to keep an eye on, then you've got a 5th-year veteran, Asia Shepherd, who just broke the ACC's 3-point career record. And then you've got an All-American, Elizabeth Kitley, inside. That doesn't even mention Kayla King, who's been phenomenal on the defensive end and is a sharpshooter, and Azana Baines inside. I mean, in the beginning of Kenny Brooks' tenure at Virginia Tech, he just didn't have talent. He just didn't have really talented bodies.
He had some players like Taylor Emery was good.
Yeah, and Reagan McGarity. And that first year so it was my freshman year, and it was Asia Shepherd's first year too. and it was Reagan McGarity, Taylor Emery, Asia Shepherd, and he had Kendall Brooks and Taylor. Rachel Camp, I believe.
Trinity Baptiste came in his second year, I want to say.
And Trinity Baptiste and Darren Mabry came in, and there was talent, but there was never this much overflowing talent, and this much off the bench, too. He brings Kiana Traylor off the bench, and she adds a different element to the game. So this team is really, really good, and I know there's a question we're going to get to later about where they'll stack up in NCAA tournament field, but I mean they have a chance to host.
So I'm always looking ahead. And sorry to look ahead. We'll get back to present day. Who all is coming back? How Asia Shepherd's not coming back.
It should be everybody but Asia Shepherd.
Everybody but Shepherd.
Yeah,
and you get they have a couple big recruits coming in. Charlize Dunn is another Australian who's
is it Charlize or Charlie's?
I don't.
You'd have to ask her. She's in school already.
Yeah, but I was gonna say she's an early enrollee. They did exactly the same thing with Georgia Amore. So she's been here since the beginning, and so she basically gets the entire spring semester and then the summer under her belt.
Yeah.
And kind of gets to sit back and learn. They got Carly Wenzel coming in. I think she's from around the San Antonio area, but she's a really good wing player. They've got some talent coming in, and the thing is, you retain the core of Elizabeth Kitley, Kayla King, Georgia Amore, and you just add to it. I guess Kiana Traylor and Emily Lytle, they might not come back. I think their eligibility is probably up, but. Yeah. But the core of the team is going to be intact, and my guess is Kenny will go and pluck a couple people out of the transfer portal because that's what he's done, and he had really good success with it with Taja Cole and Lydia Rivers a couple of years ago, and he's had even more success with it with Kion Traylor.
And it doesn't appear he's going to. You never know, but it doesn't appear he's going to lose anybody to the portal.
No,
like when Darren Mabry left, that surprised me.
Yeah, and and so the thing was, Darren Mabry.
She wanted to be a point guard.
She wanted to be the player, and Georgia Amore was coming up right behind her.
Yeah.
And Dara's, I think, more of a 2 guard than a 1. Like she's not a bad ball handler, but Georgia Amore's a better one. And she went to Notre Dame, and now she's pretty much the lead ball handler.
Yeah,
at Notre Dame.
She's doing really well.
And she's doing very well. Yeah, but I mean, even. I think the one that hurt maybe a little bit more is Trinity Baptiste, who went and played and won a national title with Arizona last year. Like she was a really, really talented player, and left. But it also opens the door for a player like Azana Baines to come in. So and it's crazy to look at it because there's been a lot of ins and outs with this women's basketball team over the years, and. There wasn't great success immediately, and that's what I wrote about in my column. Just, Kenny always talks about you have to build the program up, and they didn't have any success when he got here.
Well, one of the things he got over the hump on was, and you guys over the years have followed this a lot more closely than I have. They would win a lot of games earlier in the year, get things going, and then they would have a stretch where they'd lose a lot of games over a 6 or 8 game
ACC
stretch.
play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is just having more talent and having more depth. Like those early teams with Asia Shepherd, Reagan McGarity, Taylor Emery, those 3 players were really good. You have to remember Asia Shepherd was a freshman or a sophomore.
Yeah.
But those teams were good. The problem was they didn't have enough pieces around them. And you get into ACC play when you're playing at NC State or a Louisville or back then Florida State was phenomenal. You're playing all these really, really good teams in the ACC, and you can't hang for a full 40 minutes of basketball. And that, I think, was the problem. And you look at it this year, they have the depth. They have the talent, not just to hang, but to overcome that. And they've had it now for the past, 2 years-ish. And I think that's really been the difference. And it helps when the players that you recruit stay and develop. And like in Elizabeth Kitley's case, she's probably the best player in the ACC.
So there's, I go pretty far back with this stuff. I was following the team when they made the Sweet 16 back in, I think it was spring of '99. And back then, women's basketball games were free. And Tech got to host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. And So let me try to collect my thoughts here. There was a lot of interest in the team even before that because they finished the 97-98 season really well. Won a game in the NCAA tournament. Had everybody coming back in 98, 99. Beat UVA early back when UVA was good. They're an absolute disaster right now, but they were good back then. And that kind of lit the candle. Now, back then they were, if I'm remembering my years correctly, they were still in the Atlantic 10. And Virginia Tech started that year something like, I don't know, 23-0 or some insane number like that. And again, my memory's fuzzy on this, and I didn't prep because I didn't know that I was going to be trying to dredge these things out. But they had trouble with Xavier at the time. Xavier was the 2006-2007 NC State team, beat Seth Greenberg's team 3 times. Xavier was just that team. No matter how good you were, they struggled with them. And so I remember that I actually think they were something ridiculous like 20-1, and Xavier's the only team that had beaten them. Xavier comes into Castle, and the place was full. I'm talking 10,000 fans. And that happened that year, and then they got to host the NCAA tournament at the end of that season. And I don't remember if the tickets cost anything. They probably did. But there was a second-round game against Auburn where Castle Coliseum had 10,000 fans. And you remember the UVA game Monday night? A women's game was like that. Yeah. And Auburn had a point guard who melted down because I guess she'd never been in front of a crowd that big. So the reason I'm talking about all this stuff is that from that point on, after those teams, they went to the Sweet 16. They had a star player named Yeva Kublina. Mm-hmm. They had some good players. They had some good teams. And there was a lot of interest in the women's program, thousands of fans a game, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 fans a game. Then
they fell off.
Bonnie Hendrickson left for Kansas, and they hired Beth Dunkenberger. Beth was followed by Dennis Wolf, and the program cratered. And so you guys that go to the games and watch more of the games, I think at this point the women's basketball team is getting a lot of interest from the Tech fan base. I don't know that the fans are actually showing up in Castle. What are you guys seeing?
I think it's kind of the same way. I think it's tough because, and this is something I wrote about earlier, Tech hadn't had over 500 record in like the 9 years before Kenny Brooks arrived, besides one season. And so nobody was used to success. This is after great 90s years. And then they went to the NCAA tournament in about 2006. And so I think fans were kind of immediately, when Tech didn't win right away with Kenny, they were kind of, okay, it's the same thing.
Show me. Right.
And now they're winning, and I think it's taken Tech fans a while to realize how good this team is and how different this team is. And I agree. I don't think fans are necessarily coming out and, there's probably 3,000 people at the women's game on Sunday, which isn't bad. But
now the interest level at one point was we have a separate women's basketball message board because the interest level at one point was so high. People are like, break it off from the regular basketball board and give them their own board. But by the end of the Dunkenberger and Wolf tenures, you'd go weeks without anybody posting on that board, and I'm not exaggerating. Yeah,
Well, and I remember when you hired me and you told me that the women's basketball board was the least active board on the site.
Yeah, and now I'm going to have to create a softball board. So anyway,
but yeah, I think, and to your point about Castle, we saw what it can be like for a men's game. If this women's team can win some games, and they're on the 5 line right now, if they could get up to the 4 line. I mean, here's the thing. If they beat Louisville and NC State, they're going to be a top 4 or 3 seed
at the very
in
least.
The tournament. Yeah, they're going to host a regional. And
so top 4 seeds in each region
host. Yeah.
So there would be a Blacksburg, I guess, sub-regional tournament.
And so they would host essentially
3 games.
3 games, yeah.
Now, Bonnie Hendrickson's last year, they hosted a regional that included Penn State. I don't remember the other teams that were in. I think Tech beat Iowa in the first round, played Penn State in the second round, and attendance was about 5,000 or 6,000.
Yeah, I would. Well, and that's the thing. I would be really, really interested to see what attendance would be like for a game now. a woman, if they hosted a regional and they were like rolling. I mean, because that's the thing. If NC State's senior day, and if they can beat NC State, if because they have a chance to win the ACC, they just need a little bit of help. And there could be a scenario where they're number 2 or 3. I mean, if they win, they're gonna be top 3 in the ACC if they can finish out at least. So I would be really interested to see Castle. Like, I don't know how packed it would get. I mean, you probably know more than me since you'd seen a women's tournament hosted here before. But
well, I will say this, that was Bonnie's last year here. We didn't know it at the time. But
is that 5-6?
I think so. Yeah. It was right around. So we'd been covering women's basketball from the time they went to the Sweet 16 until that year.
Yeah.
But I remember looking around Castle and thinking, the last time Tech hosted a regional, this place was full, and now it's not. And I thought it might be time to start dialing back the coverage because we had limited resources.
Yeah.
And Bonnie left. They hired Beth Dunkenberger,
and it
things
went
started.
downhill.
Yeah.
Well, right now the Hokies currently sitting 3rd all alone in the ACC, would be in line for a double bye in the ACC tournament, so wouldn't have to play until Friday. Tough remaining schedule, though. Syracuse on Thursday, they've only got 4 ACC wins, and they're against Pitt, UVA, and Clemson. So that should be...
Syracuse should be a win. And this is a Syracuse team that, if you remember in the past, Syracuse in the past couple of years has been really good.
Yeah.
And then... I don't want to say scandal, but that's pretty much what
was a mess.
What they had,
like their
with
entire team
with Coach
much.
Quentin Helsman, or I forget how you pronounce his name, but so that Syracuse program has gone downhill, and this should be tomorrow night. This should be Tech walks in there and beats them by 15-20.
Right.
So that would be win number 12 in the ACC, but then it gets a little bit tougher. You have to go to Louisville, and we've talked about how the men have had trouble beating Louisville. Women have 2. 8 straight losses to the Cardinals, have not beaten the Cardinals since 1995.
Yeah, okay. And then so,
yeah,
it's going to be a tough one on the road.
And here's the thing, if Tech is, it's not like in the past where it's Tech walking in there hoping for an upset. Like, Louisville's good, but Tech is close to even playing field now. Just
have they
with
played
talent,
that this year?
They have not.
They have
so
not.
this is going to be the first meeting between Tech and Louisville this year, which is ironic because both the men's and the women's team play Louisville
late. Trying to kind of
for the first time.
Yeah.
I think this is a game. I mean, Louisville's really, really good, but again, it's like, if Tech comes out there and plays well, Tech has a really good chance to win, and that's the reality of it. Like, you could put Tech in pretty much any scenario, this team this year, and they could hold their own.
I think so. They're perfectly capable of beating any team in
and
the
that's
conference.
the thing. They're that good.
Yeah. That's going to be the premier game of the weekend on the women's side, Louisville, Virginia Tech on Sunday.
And that's on Sunday, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock?
Believe 2?
I believe it's 2 o'clock. Yeah.
Probably on the ACC network, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And then Hokies return home for the final week of the regular season. Miami, not tomorrow, but next Thursday. They're kind of middle of the pack in the ACC. I want to say they're 7-7 in conference play.
And Miami's a team that, again, it's one of those middle of the pack teams that'll pose Tech a little bit of trouble, but Tech should win.
Right.
And then again, Tech finishes up their season next Sunday before heading to the ACC tournament. Number 4, NC State at home. That was a tight game in Raleigh where the Hokies stormed all the way back at the end, gave themselves a chance.
Tech just shot so poorly in that game.
And we talked about this. Tech didn't even play good basketball for maybe like 15 of the 40 minutes of basketball.
At least.
And they barely lost. They lost by 5 to NC State.
Well, that was NC State coming off their big win over Louisville,
Yeah.
and I figured they were going to have a letdown, and Tech unfortunately had a letdown in the same game.
But if Tech comes out hot, if Tech plays basketball, I mean, and this is what we were just talking about, Tech can beat anybody. And this is a game where, last 4 games of the season, you've got 2 opportunities against number 1 seeds in the bracket. Like right now, NC State and Louisville are 2 of ESPN's number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament.
Wow.
And Tech has 2 of them in the final 4 games.
Well, Tech is a tough matchup for NC State in particular. Both games last year, they should have won both of them last year,
Yes.
and won one of them. And like you said, were competitive for unfortunately all but about 15 minutes of the first game. So it's interesting to hear that NC State's lining up to be a number one seed, because it's just a team I'm comfortable with Virginia Tech playing.
Well, because they match up well,
Yeah.
And it's the Elisa Cunane, Elizabeth Kitley battle, but last game Kitley got the better of her,
Yeah.
and Kitley's improved a lot, and Cunane's good, but these are two really big matchups down the stretch here, and Virginia Tech is rolling. I mean, we talked about the men's team winning 6 straight games. The women's team's won 4, and 2 of them were against ranked opponents.
Yes.
And it's a really fun team to watch when they're playing well and they're playing together.
And this Hokies team, Syracuse, Miami, if they can take care of business in those, maybe get Louisville or NC State, win a game in the tournament, you'd have to think there's going to be NCAA tournament basketball in Blacksburg come mid-March.
And that would be
Nice.
that would be really exciting, just to host an NCAA tournament regional. I mean, I don't know what the fan turnout would be like, but I know the students would show up 100%.
Yeah, and it would be an important step for the program.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Going to be a lot of fun down the stretch here. Before we get out of here on episode 224, I want to talk about softball starting 5-0, 5 wins over Power 5 teams over the weekend down in Leesburg, Florida. Kind of what everybody expected. Keely Rochard still dominant, and the bats came through as well. I mean, you couldn't ask for much more. 5-0 beating three
ranked teams.
3 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams and 3 ranked teams.
Yeah.
Great weekend for Pete DeMore and company.
Yeah, and I think people have had their doubts, about the pitching staff, because everybody knows how good Keely Rochard is. But Emma Lemley came out and won 2 games this weekend. And
Yep.
I was talking with Hokie softball insider Chip Grubb, who was down there, and his recap from the weekend is up on techsideline.com, and really, really good insight. And he got some quotes from Pete DeMore. But Emma Lemley came out and pitched well. And if Virginia Tech is going to be a force this year, Emma Lemley, and that rest of the pitching staff needs to come around. And I mean, she's only a true freshman, but she's got 2 wins under her belt already. Keely Rochard's doing Keely Rochard things, which is what everybody expected. And if they can keep it up, they're going to be really, really good this season.
So there was an interesting thing going on with Lemley where she was apparently called for 7 illegal pitches in one game.
Yeah, and
Lots
I
of
asked Chip
walks.
to explain it to me, and Chip mentioned that it's like her foot coming off of.
She hops off the rubber, I think.
Yeah.
Which is common for young pitchers to.
Yeah, apparently Chip was telling me that Oklahoma has a really, really good freshman pitcher, and Oklahoma's freshman pitcher got called for it a couple times too.
Yeah. And
so it's not just a Emma Lemley thing.
Yeah, so you're supposed to drag your foot,
Yeah.
and they'll get that ironed out. But one of the guys that posts on the Olympic Sports Board will probably create a softball board here soon, because there's a tremendous amount of interest. He said that it's correctable. It's pretty easily correctable. Lemley will probably lose 1 or 2 miles per hour, when you correct that,
Yeah.
because the hop or whatever adds some velocity to it.
Well, she went 10 2/3 innings, so 32 outs. She struck out 23 of them.
Do you have the stat off the top of your head of how many strikeouts the Tech staff had and how many innings?
I want to say 62
in 34 innings or
Yeah, it
something like
was-
that? Almost 2 per inning.
Yeah, 34 for Rochard in 20 innings and 23 for Lemley in 10 2/3. She did walk 12 because of some of the illegal pitch stuff, but
23 strikeouts in 10 innings.
unbelievable.
That's
So
Tincher
yeah,
level.
so 62 strikeouts total in 34 innings.
34 innings, that's right. I thought that was the number.
So yeah,
And that's a lot.
And here's the other thing, like Tech's bats are good, and it seemed like this is one of the things I was talking with Chip about last week. They've got, the team has so much depth. There are like 5 or 6 players that could play the infield. and they've got like 4 or 5 that could play in the outfield. They've just got a lot of experience and a lot of depth, and I think it's just finding the best hitting combination and figuring out who's hot, who's not, I guess. But I mean, this team, there's obviously Duke and Florida State and some other really good teams in the ACC, but this team is going to
cue my Clemson rant.
But
just open the checkbook and suddenly you have a good softball team.
Well, what's funny is the Clemson pitcher Valerie Cagle, I believe. I knew her growing up. She's from like my area, but she was private school growing up. But no, I mean Clemson is really good. Duke is really good. Peyton St. George played travel softball with Evan Hughes' sister.
Right.
So there are a lot of really good teams in the ACC, but Virginia Tech, can they be consistent? And when you've got Keely Rochard, now you got another number 2 option behind her. I mean, that looks really good for your season.
Yeah, I think last year it was kind of like, okay, Rochard's pitching. Now you've got a doubleheader. Who's pitching in the next one? It could, and not that the other pitchers in the rotation were bad, but it was just you didn't feel as confident. It feels like Lemley could be a young Rochard coming up through the ranks as well.
Yeah, well, and Osborne and Rosenberry are the 2 other pitchers, and they were both here last year, and they've gotten better. And I was talking to Chip, and I said it might be one of these things where like you play like a Longwood midweek, and you've got you got a doubleheader against them. You don't even have to touch Keely. You just let Lemley go one, and then let the other 2, throw the other one. And if you can do that, you're saving arms. Statistics might not be as high for Keely, but you're saving arms, and everybody's gonna be well rested.
And you mentioned the bats. Kelsey Bennett, one of the best players in the country, ranked preseason 8 of 13 over the weekend. That's hitting .615, not easy to do. Cameron Fagan had 9 hits. Meredith Slaw pinch hit grand slam against Kentucky. So it's not all pitching for this team. Even though they didn't score more than 6 runs in a game this week against really good competition, bats came through as well. Big weekend coming up this weekend. 2 games against Evansville and a game against Middle Tennessee State that they should take care of business. But
Alabama.
2 games against number 2 Alabama in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Feels like this is where the Hokies can kind of push themselves into that next echelon, that next tier of college softball if they can steal one of those.
Yeah, well, and Alabama, they got Montana Fouts, and I forget the name of their second pitcher, but both of them are really insane pitchers. And so it's basically going to be a pitching duel. And
wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 1-0 game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be very low scoring. I think it'll be kind of what pitcher can outsmart the other team, and we've seen Keely get tested, but I think this is a really big test for Virginia Tech's batters. You're playing couple of the top pitchers in the country. Can you keep up that consistency? Can Kelsey Bennett keep up that consistency? Because Tech can show it now. You imagine what a win against Alabama is going to do for your resume?
So it's interesting. It's on SEC Network Plus. Unfortunately, not the actual SEC Network. Looking at the schedule on Hokie Sports, it looks like it's only 1 game, but you guys are saying it's 2 games.
So there's a first game at the beginning, and then they play
Middle Tennessee, Evansville, then Alabama.
Yeah, so they play. It's not. That'd be bad if it was back to back.
Oh, I thought they were going down there just by themselves to play it.
It's like a tournament.
Yeah, I believe it's like the Crimson Tide Classic or something like that. So 5 games this weekend again.
It's called the Easton Bama Bash.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Cool. They got sponsored, so they changed the name of it.
So, yes, 5 games again this weekend for softball. It feels like, you never want to look past an opponent, which I'm sure they're not over in the softball program, but Evansville and Middle Tennessee State should be wins. Again, getting 1 against Alabama would be huge for this team. They're up in that Pac-12, Washington, and Alabama are pretty much the top 2.
And Tech's ranked eighth in the country this week.
Yes.
They started out 11th. They're ranked 8th now because of what they did last weekend. And if you split with Alabama, you might actually move up.
Yes. I think if you go 4-1 this weekend, that's a great weekend.
Yeah. Well, and in the past, if this was last year's team, Virginia Tech, Keely Rochard would have had to pitch the entire weekend pretty much, or she would have had to pitch. She would have pitched both Alabama games by herself, and then depending on how Tech was doing in the other games, she might have to come in and help out.
Yeah.
Now you can kind of let Keely rest a little, let Emma Lemley take care of some of that stuff, and then use Osborne and Rosenberry where needed. And if you need Keeley, you can. But just that pitching depth, I think really takes Tech to another level.
Softball's second weekend of the season this weekend. Baseball opens up this weekend as well. 3 games set against UNC Asheville at English Field. I want to say 2 p.m. on Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 o'clock on Sunday.
You're going to be on the radio, right?
I will be, since Evan's doing women's basketball.
Evan's all grown up.
I'll be on the call on the Virginia Tech Sports Network for baseball this weekend.
Nice. So if I tune in 105.3 The Bear, I'm going to hear you?
I might be WRAD.
Is it 100, Hot 100.7? Oh,
I think
that's the women's
100%.
basketball station.
I should know that. Anyway, yes, I'll be on the call for those. Tech trying to open up their season on a good note. Before we get out of here, we are presented by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Got to talk about wrestling. 3-0 now in dual meets that they've actually played. Winning against UNC number 23 this weekend, 23-11. And now a big weekend coming up on the road against UVA on Friday, and then making up that NC State meet. I don't believe it counts for ACC.
It's not a conference game. It's not.
But at least they're going to get a chance to wrestle that one. So a big weekend for the
I feel like
program.
that's for pride. Like
there was a little trash talk.
There's going to be a chip on the
yeah.
shoulder, I think, for this.
Yeah, especially. I think the backstory there is like NC State didn't want to like adjust, move their schedule around to find time to play Tech, and then after they got the forfeit,
so Tech had to take the forfeit,
and then now it's like, oh, we'll play you again, and so. But I mean, did you go to the match on Friday?
I did not.
Were you there?
I was not.
I was there, and it was
I watched most of it.
It was a good crowd. It was a really good crowd. It was senior day, of course. And Tech dominated for the most part.
Bryce Andonian has been great this
Bryce
year.
Andonian has been good. Sam Latona won. Corbin Myers, great as always. It was his senior day, and he came out and absolutely dominated. Mackay Lewis, exactly what you would expect from former national champion.
Beating a top 10 opponent as well for UNC.
Dakota Howard had a huge victory. And it's so fun watching Dakota Howard wrestle, man.
The Junkyard Dog.
You talk about your favorite athletes of all time, man. That guy.
He just goes, and it's funny because I'm sitting with one of my friends who's a former wrestler. He wrestled a lot in high school, and he was like, man, some of the things Dakota does, it's like, that is not advised in wrestling, but because it's Dakota Howard, everybody just lets him go at it.
He is what he is, He is at times technically unsound, but the energy he brings,
Oh, yeah.
I do not remember when this was, but I think it was the night or the day that Mackay Lewis got hurt last year. Dakota wrestled right after him and completely demolished the guy he was wrestling.
It was against Pitt, yeah.
Yeah, it was even at first, and then Dakota got a takedown and let him up, and got a takedown and let him up, and just boom, 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 over and over and over, and then ran off to go check on Mackay.
Yeah.
And so if you watch these threads on Twitter where the other team will announce a basketball score, and then all the GIFs and things pile in, you will see a picture in there. If you're not familiar with Virginia Tech wrestling, occasionally somebody will drop a picture in there.
I saw it in the UVA one.
It's clearly one of the roster headshots, and the guy's going,
it has Dakota Howard with glasses.
And it's Dakota Howard, man. You got to love that guy.
Yeah. And just a big weekend. I think I don't remember exactly who lost. I know Hunter Bolin lost and that went down to, I don't know what they call it in wrestling, extra period. Or it was like sudden victory.
Right.
Yeah. But across the board, Nathan Traxler had a big win. Yep. And Dakota Howard's win pretty much sealed the match.
Yeah.
So big win for Tech. They've won 3 in a row, and they've won 2 of them against ranked opponents, against Pitt and North Carolina. So they're rolling.
Well, and Virginia Tech, I don't believe it's possible for them to win the dual meet title in the ACC because of the forfeit, but a chance this weekend to beat all 5 of the other ACC wrestling programs if they can beat Virginia.
I've got to make sure.
State.
I got to watch that NC State.
I think it's at 6:00.
Wrestling can't really get chippy. Like basketball and football can get chippy with a lot of shoving and stuff.
But you can just hit each other.
Wrestling by its nature is physical.
Yeah.
It's a chippy sport from start to finish. But it'll be interesting to see if there's any yelling back and forth between the corners, so to speak, and stuff like that.
And we talked about how this was such a great weekend for Virginia Tech athletics. A chance for the next one to be even better. Wrestling facing NC State on Sunday, as is women's basketball, both premier
Women's basketball
opponents
at Louisville.
At Louisville. Yeah, so premier opponents on Sunday for those teams. Hokies men's basketball facing North Carolina on Saturday.
Softball Alabama.
Facing number 2 Alabama. And baseball starting this weekend as well has a chance to maybe even one up the weekend before if the Hokies can take care of business. I think that's going to wrap things up. Before we get out of here, let's get one question from the YouTube chat, Katie, if there's any good ones in there today.
Yeah, I'll do one question. I have one funny note first. Earlier, Will, you were talking about how we needed some more eye candy behind Chris. So Jeff Holland says, I want an always be redshirting neon flashing sign attached to the wall behind Chris.
Yeah, he tweeted the graphic out on Twitter. It has like
Oh,
a
no
always
way.
be. He like edited it, so it has a always be redshirting sign right up here.
I was wondering if we need a neon sign behind Chris, and always
I
be
love it.
redshirting would be hysterical.
We'd
Those things aren't cheap.
have to add to
They're not.
we'd have to add to Malcolm's duties there, like lighting it up anytime he mentions redshirting, like an alarm goes off or something like
We
that.
need to put confetti in the ceiling, and right, an alarm goes off and confetti drops whenever Chris says the word red shirt.
No,
No,
Chris.
you did
Yeah,
not.
Chris said he did not mention it today, but we did now.
All right, so the one question I will ask from Brent T. He says, besides Aluma and Mutz, which player is key for Virginia Tech to be successful in the final stretch of the season? Can Storm continue his steady play, or will Maddox/Padula be the spark?
I might say Couture.
Yeah,
Couture's defense is really, really important.
Oof.
I mean, we've talked about it, like just watching Couture play defense, and he got called for a couple hand check fouls against Virginia. But again, that's the first time that's really happened all season. I think depending on who Tech is playing, controlling the pace, Murphy's important just because he's the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands the most. But I think Couture is one of the more crucial players on this team.
Yeah, I don't want to do it by committee, but one of the things that's been big during the winning streak is the bench. The bench is getting more minutes, scoring more points, playing better.
David Gasson has been really good. So has Darius Maddox.
Yeah.
I'll even go with someone I think we're forgetting, Naheem Aline. I think,
Yeah.
like, you look back at the NCAA tournament game last year, he was the reason the Hokies even got that to overtime, put up 30 points in that game.
Yeah.
I think it was 28.
28,
Something like
almost
that.
30.
Yeah,
So
and he drew a lot of fouls in Saturday's game.
Yeah,
Got to the free throw line a lot.
I think if Naheem Aline can be his usual self and you're getting shooting from Couture and Storm Murphy and you got Mutz and Aluma in the paint, I think that's when the Hokies are at their best, is when Aline shooting more 4 of 7 instead of 2 of 10, taking less shots but higher quality ones.
How about that possession with 3 blocks in 4 or 5 seconds?
It was 4 seconds. Probably 5, actually. Keve blocked the first shot with 5 seconds on the shot clock, and it bounced out of bounds with 4 seconds, and then Keve blocked another one.
And then Justin
Mutz
Mutz blocked it.
another.
And then on the next possession, Sean Padula blocked home.
Oh, yes. So my random thought was that reminds me of when Cody, Chris, he recovered 3 fumbles in like 4 possessions. Cody Grimm, football game. Tech played NC State. I don't know when this was. It was probably the 2010 game, and Cody Grimm recovered 3 fumbles in NC State's first 4 possessions.
Wow.
And it just this random stuff, 3 block shots in 5 seconds. You don't see that a lot.
Yeah. Well, what a week in Castle Coliseum.
Yeah, I believe Hokie Sports put out a graphic that since February started,
10-0.
Tech is 10-0 inside Castle Coliseum
In
with
all
wrestling,
sports,
women's basketball, and men's basketball. So
Impressive.
the Hokies hoping to keep that going. Only game in Castle Coliseum this weekend, though, is Tech UNC. So Tech trying to get to 11-0.
And I believe
by the
it's
end of this
sold
weekend.
out.
It is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, we were talking about StubHub prices. Those are probably just going to keep going up as we get closer to the game.
So get there and drown out however many UNC fans are there.
Lots to watch on Saturday. I believe one of the Alabama games for softball's on Saturday. You've got baseball on Saturday, and then you've got 4 o'clock UNC inside Castle Coliseum. So should be another fun weekend for Tech Sports. Thank you, Katie, for the question in the YouTube chat. Before we get out of here, David, what do we got coming up on Tech Sideline over the next few days?
I believe Chris has a basketball column coming out today.
Either
Today or tomorrow. I put up a women's basketball column this morning. I think Will and I are going to dive into some of the nitty-gritties of men's basketball. We talked about the struggles in the last 5 minutes earlier in the season. I'm going to go do some more research and talk about how good they've been in the last 5 minutes as of late.
The UVA game in Charlottesville, it was 52-48 Hokies with about 3 minutes left. In Blacksburg, it was 52-48 Hokies with about 3 minutes
They
left.
mentioned that on the broadcast.
And what
on
happened
ESPN.
after that was completely different.
Yeah, Dan Schulman said Mutz was standing at the free throw line 52-48, and he said this is the exact score, and the Hokies did not score again in the game. So
UVA. Yeah. Obviously, softball this weekend. I believe Chip Grubb's going to be there. So that's a very Chip Grubb thing to do.
Yeah.
We've got baseball coming up. I believe tomorrow morning or this afternoon or tomorrow morning, Chris Hirons is going to have a season preview for baseball. And so, a lot of basketball coverage. I'm sure there's going to be Friday Q&A and stuff as usual. We got Tech Talk Live. We got wrestling. There's
Jack Brizendine going to be busy this weekend.
There's a lot going on. It's a good
that
time to
of
subscribe
year.
to Tech Sideline.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
That's correct.
First month is free with a monthly subscription still, I want to say.
And if you like the podcast, you should subscribe to the website, because how do you think we fund all this?
Yeah, exactly. And subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Again, put notifications on. We've heard that it's tough to know when we're going live, but if you put notifications on, you're always going to get one on your phone or to your email. So you should always know when we're getting ready for a podcast. Yeah. I think that's going to wrap it up. Anybody got anything else here?
I do not.
All right. That'll do it here on episode 224 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Want to thank you all for listening and watching. Thank everybody on set. Will Stewart, founder and general manager of TechSideline.com. You can find him on Twitter at Will Stewart TSL. David filling in on the second half, managing editor for TechSideline.com at The Real D Cunna on Twitter. We had Chris Coleman on set, the lead analyst and columnist for Tech Sideline in the first half of the show. Find him at Chris Coleman TSL on Twitter. Katie Adams did a great job in the fourth chair. Love the favorite basketball players of all time question. Make sure to check that out if you missed it. You can find her at Katie6Adams on Twitter. Malcolm Stewart, as always, phenomenal behind the scenes, and I'm your host, Jay Kleiman, signing off. Enjoy another great weekend of Hokies sports fans. We'll see you next time.